They played heroes, heartthrobs, and Hollywood royalty. But off-screen, some of the brightest stars were tangled in real-life scandals that led them straight to a jail cell. Behind the flashing cameras and flawless red carpet smiles were secrets, messy, illegal, and impossible to hide forever. Some were reckless, others thought fame made them untouchable. But when the law came knocking, even the biggest names couldn't escape justice. Here are 24 vintage Hollywood stars who were sentenced to jail, and the unbelievable stories that landed them behind bars. Robert Mitchum. Robert Mitchum was the classic cool guy of old Hollywood, rugged, smooth-talking, and impossible to rattle. But in 1948, his real life took a surprising turn when he was arrested during a police sting in Los Angeles. He was found at a private gathering where people were using hard substances, which was a serious offense at the time. He didn't deny it or try to cover it up, and he was sentenced to 60 days in county jail. Back then, even a hint of scandal could destroy a star's career. But Mitchum wasn't just any star. When he finished his sentence, he jumped right back into work. His next film became a hit, and fans seemed to admire him even more. His image as a laid-back rebel only grew stronger. What could have ruined his reputation actually made him more popular. Robert Mitchum turned a jail sentence into part of his legend. Spade Cooley. Spade Cooley was a popular Western swing musician in the 1940s and 1950s, known for his energetic performances and television appearances. Cooley was charged with causing the death of his wife, Ella Mae, after a violent incident at their home. Their teenage daughter witnessed the event and spoke about it in court. Her emotional testimony played a big role in the outcome. The trial was widely covered by the media. Fans who had admired Cooley's talent struggled to understand how things had gone so wrong. He was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. His music career ended overnight. Cooley was granted special permission in 1969 to perform at a benefit concert, his first time back on stage in years. Just after the show, he collapsed and passed away from a heart condition. Mae West. Mae West was a bold, witty, and unforgettable star of early Hollywood. She made a name for herself by challenging the norms of her time, writing and starring in plays and films that celebrated confidence and independence, especially for women. West had written and starred in a stage play called Sex, which was considered too daring for the conservative audiences of the day. Authorities claimed the play was morally questionable, and after a raid on the theater, West was arrested along with several members of the cast. She was sentenced to 10 days in jail for public indecency. Mae West wasn't ashamed. In fact, she turned the experience into part of her legend. She wore her own silk underwear in jail, dined with the warden, and used the media coverage to her advantage. By the time she was released, she was even more famous than before. Rather than hurting her career, the scandal gave it a powerful boost. Paul Kelly. Paul Kelly was a respected stage and film actor during the 1920s and 1930s, known for his dramatic roles and sharp screen presence. In 1927, Kelly was involved in a physical altercation with fellow actor Ray Raymond, which ended in Raymond's death. The incident followed a tense situation involving Kelly's romantic relationship with Raymond's wife, actress Dorothy Mackay. During a confrontation at Raymond's home, a fight broke out. Though Kelly claimed it was self-defense, Raymond died shortly afterward from a head injury. Kelly was arrested and charged with manslaughter. The case drew major attention in the press. He was found guilty and sentenced to 2 years in prison. Mackay was also convicted for withholding information during the investigation. After serving time, Kelly returned to acting, a rare comeback after such a serious scandal. He eventually married Mackay, and the two stayed together for many years. Lila Leeds. Lila Leeds was a rising star in the 1940s, often compared to Lana Turner for her beauty and screen presence. But her Hollywood career took a sharp turn in 1948 when she was arrested alongside Robert Mitchum during a police raid at a private gathering. Officers found hard substances at the scene, which led to public charges for both actors. While Mitchum was already a major star and managed to recover quickly, Lila didn't have the same support from the industry. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 60 days in jail. The public reaction was harsh, and studios distanced themselves from her almost immediately. After serving her time, Leeds tried to return to acting, but found the doors closed. She later said she felt abandoned by Hollywood and labeled unfairly. While Mitchum's career rebounded, hers never truly recovered. In the years that followed, Lila worked outside of film and eventually moved away from the spotlight. She became a symbol of how uneven the consequences can be, especially for women in the spotlight. Neal. Tom Neal was a handsome actor, best known for his role in the 1945 film Detour, a noir classic. Off-screen, however, his life took a far darker path. His career began to unravel after a violent public fight in 1951 with actor Franchot Tone over actress Barbara Payton. The altercation made headlines and damaged Neal's reputation, but things only got worse years later. In 1965, Tom Neal was charged in connection with the tragic death of his third wife, Gail Bennett. He claimed the incident was an accident, saying the gun went off during an argument, but the evidence raised serious questions, and he was eventually convicted of involuntary manslaughter. Neal was sentenced to 10 years in prison and served nearly 6 before being released on parole. By that time, his acting career was long gone. He lived quietly after his release, staying out of the public eye until his death in 1972. Neal's story is a tragic fall from grace. Once a promising Hollywood talent, he became better known for courtroom drama than movie roles. His time in prison marked the final chapter in a life filled with lost potential and irreversible mistakes. Lionel Atwill. Lionel Atwill was a well-known character actor in the 1930s and 1940s, often cast as mysterious or sinister figures in horror films like Dr. X and Son of Frankenstein. In real life, he became entangled in a scandal that brought his career to a standstill. In 1942, Atwill was called to testify before a grand jury during an investigation into alleged inappropriate activities at one of his private gatherings. It wasn't the event itself that led to his downfall, it was what he said under oath. Authorities accused him of giving false testimony and charged him with perjury. He eventually pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 5 years of probation. While he avoided prison time, Atwill did spend time in custody during the investigation. The scandal cost him dearly. Studios distanced themselves, and major roles dried up almost overnight. Though he continued acting in smaller roles, the damage to his reputation was done. Once praised for his commanding presence on screen, Atwill spent his final years trying to recover a career that never fully came back. Chester Morris. Chester Morris was a respected actor during the 1930s and 1940s, best known for playing the clever detective Boston Blackie in a long-running film series. Off-camera, he had a reputation for charm and professionalism, but in the late 1940s, his name unexpectedly made the papers for the wrong reasons. During a heated confrontation involving a personal dispute, Morris was accused of physically assaulting a man. The situation turned legal, and Morris was briefly taken into custody while the matter was investigated. Though the charges were later reduced, and he did not serve a long sentence, he did spend time in jail during the process. For a star of his caliber, even a short stay behind bars was a serious blow. In those days, actors were expected to maintain a polished image, and any run-in with the law could cast a long shadow. Studios began offering him fewer leading roles, and though he kept working, his career slowly shifted towards smaller parts and stage performances. John Barrymore. John Barrymore was part of one of Hollywood's most legendary acting families, and was widely regarded as one of the finest stage and screen performers of his time. With his deep voice and commanding presence, he was known as the Great Profile. But behind the fame was a man battling personal struggles, especially with alcohol. As his drinking worsened in the 1930s, Barrymore's off-screen behavior began drawing more attention than his acting. He was arrested multiple times for public intoxication and disorderly conduct. On more than one occasion, he spent nights in jail, sobering up in what was commonly referred to as the drunk tank. These short jail stays didn't lead to a major conviction, but they did make headlines and started to affect how studios viewed him. Directors found him increasingly unreliable, and his roles began to dwindle. Once a leading man in Shakespearean dramas and big-budget films, he was soon cast in smaller, comedic roles that often poked fun at his declining image. John Barrymore's brilliance on stage couldn't fully protect him from the consequences of his off-screen choices. His time in jail, though brief, marked a slow and very public fall from the heights of early Hollywood stardom. Timothy Carey. Timothy Carey was one of Hollywood's most eccentric and unpredictable actors, known for intense, offbeat roles in films like The Killing and Paths of Glory. Carey stood out for his raw energy and unpredictable presence, both on and off screen. In the 1950s, during filming for a low-budget movie he was producing himself, Carey tried a bizarre publicity stunt that went terribly wrong. He fired a gun loaded with blanks on set without warning anyone, intending to stir up media attention, but the stunt backfired. The incident frightened the crew, and Carey was arrested for disturbing the peace and reckless behavior. He was briefly jailed and fined. While no one was seriously hurt, the event added to his reputation as someone who couldn't be controlled. Though he continued acting in cult films and made appearances in TV shows, studios hesitated to give him major roles after that. Carey remained a fascinating figure in Hollywood, talented, but often misunderstood. His brief jail time didn't end his career, but it did confirm the growing view that working with him came with risks. Edward G. Robinson. Edward G. Robinson was one of the most iconic faces of classic gangster films, known for roles in Little Caesar and Key Largo. On screen, he played tough, commanding figures. Off-screen, however, he found himself caught in the middle of one of Hollywood's most intense political storms. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, during the Red Scare, Robinson was called to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, which was investigating alleged connections between Hollywood and communist groups. Though Robinson denied being part of any subversive organizations, he admitted to donating money to groups that were later labeled suspicious. He wasn't officially convicted of any crime, but he was briefly detained during the inquiry, and the experience left a mark. Robinson later expressed regret for being politically involved without fully understanding the group's agendas. The fallout led to a period of unofficial blacklisting. He didn't go to prison, but his career took a hit, and major studios stopped casting him in leading roles. Fatty Arbuckle. Roscoe. Fatty Arbuckle was once one of the highest-paid actors in silent film. With his playful charm and comedic timing, he helped define early Hollywood slapstick. But in 1921, his career took a tragic turn that would forever stain his legacy. At a party in San Francisco, an actress named Virginia Rapp fell seriously ill and died days later. Arbuckle was accused of being responsible for her death, and the media frenzy was immediate. Though there was no clear evidence linking him directly to the incident, public opinion turned quickly against him. He was arrested and put on trial not once, but 3 times. The first 2 trials ended with hung juries, but the third resulted in a full acquittal. Still, the damage was done. Hollywood banned him from working, and many studios distanced themselves from his name. For years, he was a cautionary tale about fame, scandal, and media power. Though he eventually returned to directing under a different name, his stardom never recovered. Anthony Quinn. Anthony Quinn was known for his powerful screen presence and unforgettable roles in classics like Zorba the Greek and Lawrence of Arabia. He brought depth and emotion to every performance, earning 2 Academy Awards during his career. But off-screen, Quinn's personal life wasn't always picture perfect. In the late 1960s, Quinn was briefly arrested and sentenced in Italy over a legal matter involving a physical altercation. While the details were kept quiet and the sentence was short, the event caused enough scandal to make headlines at the time. Quinn had reportedly gotten into a heated disagreement that turned physical, leading authorities to take legal action. Though it didn't destroy his career, it did place him under unwanted scrutiny. Quinn's charm and talent helped him move forward, but the incident remained a hidden chapter in an otherwise celebrated life. He continued working in Hollywood and abroad, maintaining his place as a beloved actor, even as the public slowly forgot about the jail time. Steve Cochran. Steve Cochran had the looks, charm, and talent to be a top leading man in Hollywood's golden age. Known for his roles in crime dramas and film noir, he often played the tough guy with a hidden vulnerability. But off-screen, his behavior didn't always match the polished image seen on the big screen. In the early 1950s, Cochran was arrested and sentenced to a short jail term after a bar altercation turned physical. Witnesses described him as intoxicated and aggressive, and when law enforcement got involved, things escalated quickly. It wasn't his first brush. With trouble, Cochran had a reputation in Hollywood for wild behavior and risky choices, especially when it came to parties and relationships. While his sentence was not long, it was enough to make the press take notice. Studios grew hesitant, and his career slowly began to lose momentum. Cochran continued working in smaller films and even tried producing his own projects, but the shadow of his off-screen troubles followed him. He died young under mysterious circumstances aboard a boat in 1965. He left behind a body of compelling work. Susan Hayward. Susan Hayward was one of the most powerful dramatic actresses of Hollywood's golden age. With her fiery red hair and intense performances, she earned a devoted fan base and even won an Academy Award. But behind her success was a brush with the law that most fans never heard about. In 1951, Hayward was sentenced to jail, not for violence or scandal, but for contempt of court during a heated custody battle. At the time, she was fighting for her children during a difficult divorce. The judge had issued strict orders regarding her children's travel and visitation. But Susan, believing she was doing what was best for them, went against the ruling. Her decision led to a brief jail sentence that quickly made headlines. Though her time behind bars was short, the incident left a lasting mark on her image. Hollywood studios worried about public opinion, but fans admired her strength and fierce loyalty to her children. Hayward eventually recovered her standing in the industry, continuing to deliver strong performances. Still, her moment in jail revealed how even glamorous stars could be pulled into messy legal struggles when personal life clashes with the law. She remained both admired and misunderstood. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn was the ultimate swashbuckling hero of classic Hollywood. With his sword fights, daring rescues, and charm, he became a major box office star in films like Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood. But off-screen, his life was far from heroic, and one incident nearly ended his career. In 1942, Flynn was charged with a serious crime involving 2 underage girls. The trial was one of the biggest scandals of its time, splashed across newspapers and hotly debated in Hollywood circles. Though he was ultimately acquitted by the jury, the damage to his reputation lingered. Public opinion was divided. Some believed he was targeted because of his fame, while others saw it as a reflection of the wild behavior he was already known for. Even though he avoided prison, the experience changed his public image. Flynn continued acting, but the charm that once made him a symbol of adventure now carried a darker shadow. Many in the industry distanced themselves, and studios became more cautious with his roles. Behind the dashing roles was a man whose private choices nearly cost him everything. Tierney. Jean Tierney was one of the most captivating actresses of the 1940s, known for her roles in Laura and Leave Her to Heaven. But behind her classic beauty was a complicated personal life, marked by loss and emotional battles. What few remember today is that she also spent time behind bars, though not for crime, but due to mental health struggles that led to confinement. After years of struggling with deep depression, Tierney was committed to various psychiatric facilities. In the early 1950s, her condition worsened, and she was placed in institutions where the treatments were harsh. She later revealed that she had undergone electroshock therapy more than 20 times, and at one point, she was detained for months against her will. Though it wasn't a criminal jail, her forced institutionalization was a kind of prison, isolating, painful, and misunderstood. It was a time when mental illness was heavily stigmatized, especially for women in the spotlight. Jean Tierney eventually returned to the screen and spoke out about her experiences, helping to bring awareness to mental health. Bobby Driscoll. Bobby Driscoll was once Disney's golden boy, the voice of Peter Pan, and the face of countless classics. But as he grew older, Hollywood turned its back on him. What followed was a heartbreaking downfall, including a brush with the law that led to time in jail. After being dropped by Disney and struggling to find roles as a teen, Driscoll's life took a dark turn. By his early 20s, he was experimenting with substances and hanging around the wrong crowds. In 1961, he was arrested in California for drug possession, burglary, and forging checks. The court sentenced him to time in jail, and later, he was placed in a rehab facility. His Hollywood fame didn't save him from the harsh reality of addiction and rejection. When he was released, he tried to return to acting, but was turned away. He ended up broke, living anonymously in New York's East Village. Bobby was a child star cheered by millions, only to be forgotten and left behind. He died alone at age 31. Hattie McDaniel. Hattie McDaniel made history as the first black person to win an Academy Award for her unforgettable role as Mammy in Gone with the Wind. But even groundbreaking success couldn't shield her from the harsh realities of the time or from the law. In the 1940s, McDaniel owned a mansion in the West Adams neighborhood of Los Angeles, which she rented out to fellow black entertainers and actors. But the area was a predominantly white community, and her presence sparked legal battles over race-based housing restrictions. Eventually, the case escalated. When Hattie refused to stop renting to black tenants, she was arrested and briefly jailed for violating local ordinances. The incident exposed the deeply racist housing laws of the time, and McDaniel's bold defiance made her a quiet pioneer in the civil rights struggle, even if it cost her peace and public favor. Though she never spent long in jail, the arrest was a powerful symbol. Hattie McDaniel used her fame not just to break barriers in film, but to challenge injustice off-screen too. Her courage paved the way for future black actors to live and work on their own terms. Gig Young. Gig Young was a respected actor and Academy Award winner for his role in They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Behind the scenes, though, his life was far from glamorous. Plagued by alcoholism, mental health struggles, and a string of failed marriages, Young's career spiraled in the 1970s. In 1976, he married German actress Kim Schmidt. Just 3 weeks later, tragedy struck. Both were found dead in their New York apartment, Kim shot in the head, and Young beside her, also dead from a gunshot. The case was ruled a murder-suicide, with Young as the shooter. Though he was never jailed for this final act, Gig Young had several prior arrests for drunk driving, assault, and violent outbursts. He spent multiple nights in jail throughout his decline, often after bar fights or threatening behavior. Once praised for his talent and charm, Gig Young's legacy became a dark cautionary tale. Tony Curtis. Tony Curtis was a silver screen heartthrob, best known for his roles in Some Like It Hot and Spartacus. He had charm, talent, and an image that Hollywood adored. But off-camera, life was messier. Fame brought temptations, and Curtis didn't always make the best choices. In the 1960s and 70s, his struggle with substance use grew more intense. He became known for erratic behavior, financial troubles, and brushes with the law. In one incident during the late 1970s, Curtis was arrested for hard substance possession while traveling. Although not a violent crime, it was serious enough to land him in legal trouble. He spent time in jail and had to face public embarrassment, something rare for stars of his status at the time. It was a wake-up call that forced him to reevaluate his life. Curtis later spoke openly about the pressures of fame and how easy it was to lose yourself in the spotlight. He worked hard to recover and make peace with his past. Veronica Lake. Veronica Lake was once the queen of the silver screen, famous for her iconic peekaboo hairstyle and smoky allure in noir films like This Gun for Hire and The Blue Dahlia. But behind that glamorous facade was a woman battling personal demons, financial hardship, and a Hollywood system that used her up and threw her away. By the 1950s, Lake's career had all but vanished. The studios lost interest, and the roles stopped coming. Alone and struggling, she disappeared from the spotlight. Years later, the public was stunned when news broke that the former starlet had been arrested, not for a dramatic scandal, but for failing to pay a hotel bill in New York. Broke and living under a different name, Lake was briefly jailed for the unpaid debt. It was a heartbreaking fall from grace. This wasn't a crime of greed or malice. It was the quiet desperation of a forgotten star trying to survive. The arrest made headlines not because of its severity, but because it showed just how far a Hollywood star could fall. Peter Lawford. Peter Lawford was known as a smooth-talking member of the Rat Pack, often seen alongside Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, but his charm couldn't keep him out of trouble forever. While most of Lawford's legal issues were swept under the rug by powerful friends, one moment in the late 1960s caught public attention. During a wild party at his California home, hard substances were found, and he was briefly arrested. Although the charge didn't lead to a long sentence, it shocked fans who saw him as clean-cut. What made the incident more damaging was how it exposed the darker side of Lawford's lifestyle: long nights, risky behavior, and a growing dependence on substances to cope with fading fame. As Hollywood changed and his star began to dim, Lawford found himself increasingly isolated, struggling with addiction and depression. Peter Lawford's demons weren't limited to addiction. His life was plagued by deep regret over lost family ties and personal betrayals. After divorcing Patricia Kennedy, he became estranged from many in the Kennedy family and slowly slipped into isolation. Though he once ran in glamorous circles, Lawford ended up broke, alone, and heavily dependent on substances. His Hollywood charm faded into sadness, and he reportedly struggled with guilt about his role in Marilyn Monroe's final hours. He served time behind bars, though briefly, and afterward tried to clean up, but the damage was done. He lost roles, friendships, and the polished image that once made him a household name. In the end, the man once known for his suave image died battling kidney and liver disease, a shell of the star he once was. Judy Garland. Judy Garland is often remembered for her heartbreaking childhood and tragic end. But what many forget is that she also had a run-in with the law. In the early 1960s, years after her MGM stardom had faded, Judy was struggling to revive her career and manage her deepening addiction. During one low point, she was arrested in New York City for disturbing the peace after a public outburst at a hotel. Though the charge didn't lead to prison time, she was briefly held in jail overnight, an incident that further exposed how far her life had spiraled. This was Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, once the symbol of innocence and hope, but Judy's world had become one of instability, emotional breakdowns, and lost opportunities worldwide. MGM had profited from her youth, but when she needed help most, the studio vanished. At times, Judy pawned personal items and borrowed money to survive. The constant instability affected her mental health and created a chaotic home environment for her children, especially Liza Minnelli. The arrest was a reflection of deeper struggles. Garland was battling depression, dependency, and exhaustion from years of exploitation in Hollywood. Though she continued to perform after the incident, it was clear that her life was becoming harder to manage. Judy's brief stay behind bars didn't define her legacy, but it was one of many signs that the child star who once sang over the rainbow had been failed by the very industry that built her. Thanks for watching. If these stories of crime and consequence from old Hollywood surprised you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell for more raw truths behind the silver screen. Know of another vintage star who landed behind bars or made headlines for breaking the law? Drop it in the comments. See you in the next video.